Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
Just to review where we've been and what's happening and what this class is, we've turned this class into a class on Jewish theology, Jewish understandings, thoughts about God, to help us as daveners, as daily daveners, think through our own thoughts about God, mentioned in the Siddur many times on every page. And we started this class, this phase of class, the last April of 2023, the last Tuesday in April 2023, over a year ago. I'm waiting for a rainy Sunday so that I can go back to all those earlier podcasts and actually label them so that we know what each one is. But as my wife and I, both of us from the East Coast, say to each other, there's just never enough rainy Sundays out here in Los Angeles to take care of all the rainy Sunday tasks. So someday I'll do that. But we're going historically chronologically. We started with ideas about God in the Bible. We're actually going to review a bit of that today. And we talked about ideas about God in rabbinic thinking, the Talmudic era. And now we're up to medieval. And we're going to be doing medieval philosophy and talking about Rambam, Maimonides today and probably next week, possibly the week after. I don't know. So I'm a little bit above my pay grade here. You know, Tanakh, Bible, I know reasonably well, and rabbinic, sort of a decent familiarity. And once we're talking about medieval philosophy, I'm really out of my element. So I'll do the best I can. And if anyone wants to contradict me and say they know more than I do about what I'm talking about, I'll happily agree to that. What we're going to do looking in the medievals is I think we're going to look at two things. We're going to look at philosophy and Kabbalah, which have very different ideas about God. Actually, I think sometimes self-consciously so, meaning each is aware on some level of the other. And without explicitly saying, I disagree, they are implicitly disagreeing. For philosophy, which means Jewish medieval rationalist philosophy, we'll look at Maimonides. And this is where I say, oh, I'm out of my element. And maybe we should also look at, I don't know, Ibn Kaspi and Rabbi Yosef Albo and other people that I've heard about but never read anything of theirs. So surely there are other philosophers who would have something to say that would be useful, but I'm just looking at Rambam, Maimonides, and I'm just looking at what I know. So let's talk a little bit about Maimonides. Rambam, Resh Mem Bet Mem, Rabbi Moses ben Maimon. So Maimonides is Greek English for the Maimonidean one, or son of Maimon. Rambam lived in the 1100s or the 12th century, 1135 to 1204. Those dates always stick in my mind for some reason, so just say the 1100s. Born in Cordoba, Spain. There was apparently a Muslim dynasty in Spain that was more persecutory of non-Muslims than some other dynasties had been. So the family migrated to North Africa. Some scholars actually think that the Maimon family lived kind of under the radar and passed as Muslims in public for a time. And then went to Akko in Eretz Israel, and then Egypt. And what we know about Rambam, his great career as the doctor to the Sultan, and Jews then coming and consulting him all afternoon and him writing at night, is from his career in Egypt. He was a scholar. Then his brother died, so he became responsible for the family finances, and that's when he had to start working as a doctor. That was his day job, or as we say in LA, his paycheck job. His passion project was Torah study. So Rambam wrote some medical treatises. He wrote epistles or long letters, theological letters to various diaspora communities. But he is most known to us, to most Jews, for three great works. The first was his commentary on the Mishnah, which was written in Arabic, the lingua franca. The second is the Mishnah Torah, his code of Jewish law, which is what we're going to be looking at, which was written in Hebrew. And the third was Guide for the Perplexed, which is meant to be a specialty work, allegedly written to one particular questioner, that was written in Arabic. And that was about harmonizing the rationalist philosophy of the day with faith. So for Rambam, and this is important even though we're going to read the Mishnah Torah, which is not the Guide to the Perplexed, for Rambam, the science of the day was philosophy, which I am told from reading books was Neo-Aristotelian philosophy. So if you pin me to the wall and say, what's the difference between Neoplatonist and Neo-Aristotelian, or original Aristotelian and Neo-Aristotelian, I'd have to say to you, sorry, I didn't take that class and I don't know the answer. But Rambam is referred to as a Neo-Aristotelian. He actually refers to Aristotle and the philosophical works of Aristotle, which he probably read he didn't read Greek, he read an Arabic translation. And this is what passed in Rambam's era for science. And Rambam understood science or philosophy to give us the highest truth based on human reason, and revelation, the Torah, to give us the highest truth based on revelation from God. And his belief was that these two things, that both are truth with a capital T, and there cannot be a contradiction. No contradiction between science and Torah. Guide for the Perplexed is written as a long philosophical work to a puzzled, air quotes, puzzled disciple who says, but there seem to me to be conflicts between reason and faith. And Rambam writes the Guide for the Perplexed, Moreh Nevuchim, back to this disciple to show that there is no conflict between faith and reason. So he would be one of the people nowadays who would be saying, we infer from this, he would be one of the people nowadays who would be saying, he would be one of the Jewish thinkers who would be saying, dinosaurs were real and lived millions of years ago, as opposed to some of a more ultra-Orthodox anti-scientific bent who say that faith is above reason, who would say, maybe they were dinosaurs, but they walked the earth 5,000 years ago next to human beings. Or, as a Rebbe said to me when I was growing up in day school, I'm trying to remember if the Rebbe said this in 7th grade or 8th grade or 9th grade, Hashem can make miracles, and if God can make miracles, God can make dinosaur fossils appear to be millions of years old to test your faith, to see if you really believe that the earth is only 5,700 and such years old, whatever year it was when the Rebbe told me that. So Rambam surely would not be one of those who say that today. And there's conflict within the Orthodox world about faith and reason. By the way, footnote, this is probably the reason that Art Scroll, which is a wonderful publishing house based in Brooklyn, and which is ideologically and theologically Haredi. It is not centrist Orthodox. It is not modern Orthodox. It is ultra-Orthodox, although Haredim don't like the term ultra-Orthodox, but it is Haredi, ultra-Orthodox. Art Scroll is translated like everything, but not the Guide for the Perplexed, because they don't think, we infer from that, they don't think that should be on the Jewish household's bookshelf, right? Because debate between science and revelation and saying the two cannot disagree with each other is risky. Everything you need to know, the sages taught you. So there is no Art Scroll translation of the Guide to the Perplexed or other medieval works. And that's probably the reason why. We're going to talk about Rambam's Mishnah Torah, his code of Jewish law, which he wrote in the late 1100s. It's divided into 14 books. So he nicknamed it the Yad HaChazakah, the mighty hand, because Yad is spelled Yud Dalid, which is numerology for 14. Yud is 10, Dalid is 4. So it's a kind of a, not a joke, but a pun, right? Yad 14, mighty hand, right? 14 books in which it's a massive, incredible work in which he attempted in clear Hebrew to organize all of Jewish law up until then. Another footnote about Jewish law codes. So Jewish law evolves as alternating waves of expansion and contraction. Expansion means there's a lot of laws. Contraction means someone says, okay, I've got to write all these down in one place and organize them. So earliest example of this, for example, is the Chumash, right? There's a law code in Shemot, Exodus. There's a law code in Vayikra, Leviticus. There's a law code in Devarim. There are 3 big law codes in the Chumash. Sometimes they disagree with each other. They've been gathered into one place. Then there's oral law, which gets written down as the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is organized totally different than the Bible. It's a new organizational system, right? Written about the year 200. And then there's lots of arguments about the Mishnah. Those arguments get written down in the Talmud. And for anyone who studied any Talmud, you know that it would be hard to find something you were looking for in the Talmud, like the laws of lighting Hanukkah candles are in tractate Shabbat, and there is no tractate about Hanukkah. So how would you know that without an index? You know that just because you study Talmud, meaning to know where anything is in the Talmud before the era of indexing, you need to know the whole Talmud, and the Talmud is arranged partly topically, but partly associationally, because Shabbat, the tractate Shabbat talks about lighting candles, and then it associates with lighting Hanukkah candles, and then we have the story of Hanukkah and the rules of Hanukkah, right? Stuck in the middle of tractate Shabbat. It's just one, famous example. So the Talmud is not a great work in which to find something you need, but it's arranged according to the Mishnah, and it's a large sprawling document. And then it's edited in the year maybe 600 of the Common Era. And then for the next several hundred years, there are different questions. When people ask a rabbi a question and the rabbi writes an answer, it's called a responsum in English, plural responsa, or a tshuva. And Jews move to different places. And then they have questions like, in Finland, if the sun never sets on Saturday night in the summer, when do you say Havdalah, right? Mm-hmm. Or we own vineyards in France and we're partners with non-Jews, and there's certain strictures against non-Jews handling wine, right? We're still be kosher wine. So how do we manage our vineyard ownership? So there are all kinds of questions that come up. Rabbis write answers. You'd have to be a great scholar to know where everything is and own all the manuscripts to know where to find something. And then, just like the Mishnah, some scholar will come along and say, okay, I've got to organize this. Okay. So Maimonides is a major attempt to organize all of known Jewish law up to his time, and analogous to the Mishnah is a totally new organizational scheme. And Maimonides' scheme is actually logical. So there's of the 14 books, one of the divisions is about festivals, and one of the sub-books within festivals is about Hanukkah. And he tells you there's several mitzvot of Hanukkah, and I'm writing this number of chapters. And that way you would actually be able to find something. Okay. And this is really the genius of Rambam, Maimonides. The criticism of Maimonides is he never tells you what his source is. So when there are disagreements in the Talmud, as there are about just about everything, and there's no resolution, he will decide and he will not tell you what his source is. He just states it sort of as the Mishnah does. Actually, very often the Mishnah says Rabbi Eliezer says so-and-so, Rabbi Meir says so-and-so. Rambam's is all anonymous. Here's what the law is. You want to find the law. I've organized it for you in a straightforward fashion. Then many of us have heard of the Shulchan Aruch, which is a code of Jewish law in the 1500s, which is a whole other organizational structure, which doesn't follow the Mishnah's order and doesn't follow Maimonides' order. I'm not an expert in what I'm about to say, but I am told that there are very few Jewish living communities who practice halakha according to Maimonides' Mishnah Torah. I am told the Yemenites do, and maybe there are some other so-called Eidot HaMizrach, or, Easterners, North Africans who do. If you ask me, like, Persians, Iraqis, Georgians, Moroccans, do they go by Rambam or Shulchan Aruch? I think the answer is usually Shulchan Aruch, but I'm not expert in this. I've heard that it's only the Yemenites who still say Maimonides is our highest authority. When Maimonides disagrees with the Shulchan Aruch, we go by Maimonides. Okay? This is the greatness of Maimonides' law code. Now, book 1 of his law code is called Sefer Ahava, the book of, I wouldn't call it love. I translate it as devotion. It's about devotion to God. And sub-book 1, section 1, is called Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah, the laws of the Torah's foundations. And in this, Maimonides talks about the nature of God, and then he has a chapter about angels, and he has a chapter about the soul, and he has a chapter about devotion to God and saying the Shema. And then he has sections, by the way, within the book of devotion. He has sections on tshuva, repentance, idol worship, to know like what's bad idol worship. So these are laws that are not, civil practice or criminal practice or holidays or marital laws. These are kind of more foundational thoughts about Jewish life, and therefore a little bit more what we would call philosophical. Okay, so we're going to look at Maimonides. All of this is just to set the stage of what we're going to look at. Maimonides' Code of Jewish Law, called the Mishneh Torah, which means the second Torah. Okay, which is divided into 14 books, 14 divisions. Division is called Sefer Ahava, the book of devotion. Section 1 of Sefer Ahava is Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah, the laws of the foundations of Torah. And we're going to read chapter 1. So we're actually going to read the first chapter of Maimonides' Mishneh Torah. I'm going to give you all of it in the Word document. It's about, I think, 12 paragraphs, although we're not going to read all of it. And we're not going to finish what we're going to finish today. First, I'm going to pause and say, are there any questions about anything that I said? All of this is by way of preamble. Larry.
I'd like a short answer.
Yes.
Which I hope you can give me, because you talked about philosophy, you talked about theology, philosophy, and then you also mentioned Kabbalah.
Yeah.
I don't really know what philosophy is.
Okay.
And I even looked it up. There's a zillion different definitions of philosophy. What did you mean when you differentiated philosophy from theology?
So I don't want to, so I don't want to differentiate it necessarily from theology. Theology is literally just means ideas about God. Okay. Philosophy in this context, I'm not talking about your class in college. In this context means medieval people who read a body of literature that was called philosophy, which is descended from the Greeks. Most of these people, I guess there were probably Christian monks who read it in Greek, but Jews and Muslims read it in Arabic translation of the Greek. And they said, this is the body of knowledge that humans have arrived at through reason and intellect, which tells us the truth about the world.
Thank you.
Okay. So it's really actually their definition of a particular body of literature and a particular approach. Okay. And they are clearly anti-Kabbalistic, and the Kabbalists are clearly anti-philosophy. And books have been written about that. Okay. Without further ado, I am going to attempt to screen share. Okay. And this is going to be attached today. It's 6 pages long. We're not going to finish it today also, and we'll carry on next week, but also we're going to not read all of it. I'm going to say we're going to skip this paragraph. We're going to skip that paragraph. Okay. All right. Here we are. Mishnah Torah, Book 1, Division 1, Chapter 1, Paragraph 1. Yesod ha-yesodot ve'amud ha-chochmot. The foundation of all foundations and the pillar of all wisdoms is to know sheyesh sham matsui rishon. Translated here from Sefaria, Sefaria took it from some translation from decades ago. Primary being. Anyone who knows Hebrew knows that matsui rishon doesn't exactly mean that. It's usually translated in modern English as prime mover. Matsui means reality, a thing that is found. The first thing. That's really a better translation. There is a first thing. V'hu mamtzi kol nimtza. And that first thing creates everything else, all the other things. And all the things in the heavens and the earth and in between, because Rambam also talks about angels, okay? Everything in the heavens and the earth and in between only exists because of the truth of his existence. Meaning, and he's going to talk about this a little more, without God, there is no universe. Everything exists only because God exists. Okay. Why do I exist? Because I have DNA, and I have physical matter, and I have a soul. Where did all that come from? Well, my DNA, and whatever. My blood comes from what I ate for breakfast today. Where did that come from? It came from what grew in the ground and someone grew it. What did that come from? What did it all come from? It came from a big bang, with molecules, right? Billions of years ago. What did that come from? The first mover. Everything is driven or moved by something else. God is the first mover. You can call it prime mover, prime existence, first existence. Here they translated first being. Okay? By the way, I'd like to point out the first Hebrew words, the first 4 Hebrew words. If we look at the initials, what are the initials of the first 4 Hebrew words?
Yud Hey Vav Hey.
Look at that. Rambam gave us a little code. Yud Hey and then Vav Hey. God's name. God's holy, ineffable, unpronounceable name. Right? So he starts that out with Yesod ha-Yesodot ve'amud ha-Chochmot. Because he wants to start with Yud Hey Vav Hey. Okay? So God is the prime mover. By the way, a lot of this philosophy is abstract. You say, what is a prime mover? I don't know. Okay. It means the first thing that exists and all other things exist because of it. Okay.
Today it's Amazon Prime.
Okay. And if you would think that God does not exist, nothing else could not exist. If there were not God, there could be no universe. Okay. This is important. Paragraph 3. If you could imagine that nothing else existed, God would still exist. I'm going to say this in very different words, and he says this elsewhere. Okay. Everything that exists is what we would call, in modern English, the universe. If I said, give me a word for everything, right? Like the earth, the world, the stars, the sky, the galaxy. Give me one word that says everything. You'd say, oh, that's the universe, right? I'm not going to ask you to, like Larry, I'm not going to ask you to define universe, okay? Because I don't think I could define it, but we'd say the universe. Maimonides says, if the universe did not exist, God would still exist. Meaning, God is not a part of the universe. Meaning, God is outside the universe. The nullification of their existence, there means all the other entities in the world, would not nullify God's existence, because all the other entities require God, and God does not require any of them. Everyone follow that? So God's existence is somehow independent of the universe and is therefore fundamentally different than the universe, right? Because God could say poof and nitrogen would cease to exist. Let us just say, okay? Because God creates nitrogen, or God created the forces that create nitrogen. So God could uncreate nitrogen, okay? Therefore, the reality of God is on a, sorry, it's murky. I know that, but just, we got to stick with it. The reality of God is fundamentally different than the reality of nitrogen. It's not like there are tables and there's the sun and there are souls and there are angels and there's nitrogen and there's God. God is not in that category. God is fundamentally outside of that category, because all those other things are a part of the universe. God is not part of the universe. God is the, I'll just say the word entity, right, that set all that in motion, and therefore is fundamentally unlike anything else, which means the reality of God is fundamentally unlike any other reality of any other thing. May I say that one more time, and then we'll move on? The reality of God is fundamentally unlike the reality of any other thing. So does God exist? Yes, but not in the same way that nitrogen exists, or angels exist, or your soul exists. Whatever exists mean as applies to those things, God is somehow something different. The universe could stop existing and God would still exist. And paragraph 4, this is what it means when it says, Ein od milavado. This is a very good, we sing Ein od, that new melody for Ein od, for Aleinu that we sing sometimes, which comes from Deuteronomy. Maimonides has sort of a different interpretation of it. What does it mean? It means there is nothing else that is like God. Ein sham matsui emet milavado kimoto. There is nothing true or real, right? Emet means true. I think here it also means real. There is nothing else that is real in the same way God is. Everyone follow me? Sometimes people say like your soul is the invisible part of you that animates you. God is the soul of the universe that animates the universe. No, says Maimonides. God is not in the universe. God is not the soul of the universe. God is outside the universe. Okay? I'm going to add one more paragraph today, and then we're going to stop. God is, you'll forgive me, paragraph 5, spinning plates. Spinning plates. Okay? The universe is all spinning plates. Okay? The spinning plates for Maimonides, because he was what do we say if you believe the earth is flat? Pre-Copernican? I can't remember. Pre-Galileo? Whatever it is. His universe is not our understanding of the universe. His universe is understanding that the earth is flat and it dwells inside various concentric circles called spheres, and it's bounded by a sphere. He calls that sphere the Galgal. He controls the sphere, hu manhig hagalgal, with infinite power. Our understanding, our contemporary scientific understanding, which I think Rambam would agree with, instead of calling it a sphere, he would call it the universe. And he would probably agree that it's not a sphere, but rather it's galaxies rushing out from the middle, okay, all that physics stuff. So sorry for saying God, is the entity that runs the sphere without interruption, right? Everything is The atoms are always moving. The galaxies are always rushing. Why are they doing that? Because God is running it. In my bastardized version of it, you'll apologize. Spinning plates. Okay, the whole universe is spinning plates. God is spinning them. V'hu baruch hu hamisabevoto. God runs the universe. He's spinning plates, but without a hand and without a body. So God isn't in the universe, is fundamentally unlike anything in the universe. The universe could not exist. He'll go on to say God existed before the universe. God will exist after the universe, right? We'll read some prayers that we say that actually say that say in prayer form a poetic version of this philosophy, right? Look at Adon Olam, which we'll look at sometime in the next couple of weeks. Okay. It's all constantly, by the way, in modern parlance, we might say, the energy of the universe is constantly flowing. Okay. We wouldn't say the sphere is turning. That's how Maimonides said it. We would say the energy of the universe is constantly flowing. Why? Because God is constantly doing that from outside the universe. The key part is the outside the universe, which is what makes it different from Kabbalah. Okay. That's all we're going to do today by way of text. We're going to continue next week, but there was a hand up. Larry had a hand. I'm going to unshare. Okay, Larry.
So kind of a quick two-part question. So I don't know where the translation you had on comes from, because Galgal seems to me to be pretty clear. You're right. Plate or wheel or circle or something like that.
But in medieval philosophy, I'm just telling you, medieval philosophy, it means a sphere.
So if it meant a sphere, that's fine. Do you think that Maimonides and the other scientists, philosophical scientists of his day, understood that the Earth was a sphere and that there were other spheres in what I'll call universe?
I'm not 100% sure of the answer. I think they believed that the Earth was a flat disk and there's stuff under it, and it is surrounded by, they saw the 7 heavenly bodies, sun, moon, and the, 5 big stars. They were able to observe them, and the general belief was that each one traversed around the Earth in a orbit that they would call a shell. Okay? And these shells are called different things. Sometimes they are called heavens. There are 7 heavens. They're concentric shells. There is 7. Sometimes they're called shells. Sometimes they're called spheres. In Kabbalah, they're called sphirot. But there are 7 levels of stuff out there. I think they thought the Earth was flat. The Earth might have been a round disk. Some of them thought, but it was flat. Okay. And it was contained within 7 concentric shells. And the outer one was the outermost shell. And I think they thought there's nothing outside of that. There's no thing outside of that. Meaning we think of infinite space. I don't think they thought space was infinite. I think they thought space was bounded. That's what I think. Now we're far above my pay grade. Okay. But the Earth is flat, and it's contained within 7 concentric levels, spheres, shells. The Galgal is his word for the whole giant spherical apparatus. And that was how they understand. That is my understanding of how they understood the universe. He knew on some level that everything is always changing. He didn't know about electrons, but he knew about decay and change, right? So he knew that everything was, I'm going to call it again, spinning, moving, changing. There must be something that drives it. There's no such thing as something that it moves without being moved, right? If the book moves, it's because I pushed it. I pushed it because my brain told my hand to push it, although Maimonides might not have known all about nerves and brain cells, probably for sure. And then we'd say, okay, what got my brain to push it is I had some idea in my brain, which was electrons firing, and They're business school people who talk about where does choice really come from. Business school people and neuroscientists. Where does choice really come from? There is no free choice. It's all determined by what's going on in our brains. So he would say, okay, all that is determined by something. There must have been a first something that set everything in motion in time, and that continues to have it be in motion. He'll say, I don't think we read it yet, but we'll read next week. And that if God stopped spinning plates, nothing would exist anymore. The Galgal would cease to exist. God would keep existing. And God could choose to do that. Just as God chose to create the universe, God could choose to uncreate the universe. That's my answer. Is that a fair enough answer?
Thank you, man. Good answer.
I'm pretty sure that's what they thought. Not a medieval philosophy expert. Okay. Other questions, comments? So it gets very heady and abstract. By the way, it gets more abstract. There's a line where he says, God is the knowledge, and God is the knower, and God is the known. God is the mind, God is the thought that is thought by the mind. It's a little bit like, I don't know, that Indian, not Native American, but from India, God, the dancer is the dance. So it's a little bit like that, because Maimonides believes, so if that entity is fundamentally unlike anything in the universe and has no body, what is it? Maimonides says it's pure. It's usually translated in English as intellect. It's pure mind. And in California in 2024, we might say spirit instead of mind. Whether you say mind or whether you say spirit is kind of a bias. But he would say it is pure, unembodied, abstract, totally non-physical mind. Don't ask me what that means. Okay. Don't ask me what that leaves you with. Okay. But we're just trying to do the alphabet of medieval Jewish rationalist philosophy. By the way, footnote, there are some people who say, Jewish thinkers, who say Rambam is totally wrong. Okay. We'll see next week, I hope, in this chapter, some of Maimonides' arguments, if you want to read ahead, because it'll go out later today, the whole chapter. If you want to read ahead, you'll see that Maimonides says that some things to explain away some of the things we read in the Torah and in rabbinic thinking. And there are some contemporary thinkers who say Maimonides is totally wrong. This idea that God is totally disembodied and outside the universe and abstract is a Greek idea that Maimonides imported, and it is foreign to Jewish thought. Maimonides as a rationalist philosopher, is a slave to Greek thought, right? And that this is not Jewish. But this is what Rambam says. Okay, to be continued, God willing. Have a healthy week. Be Torah.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.